Now then, folks, how we doing? It's James JT at the movies, and I'm back with you for episode 2 of What Have I Been Watching. So this was something that I said in my my YouTube update back in September that I was going to start doing on a more regular basis, actually, rather than just talking about the collecting of the movies that you can see behind me, talk about what I've been watching as well. And I'm going to briefly discuss another 4 titles with you that I've been watching recently. And I suppose we'll start with a real heavyweight. I'll show you them on physical media this time. This is my my lovely steelbook edition of this film, and this is The Shawshank Redemption. I'm sure that there won't be many people on this channel that haven't seen it or haven't at least heard of the film The Shawshank Redemption. So I'm sure you all know that it's obviously regarded as one of the best films of all time. Certainly one of the best films in probably what I'd call modern cinema of, you know, the last 40 years or so. This is a film I come back to probably once every couple of years, and I always thoroughly enjoy it, and this time was no different. This time I think was the first time watching it on Blu-ray in HD, and it did make all the difference, you know, that sharper image and it being really sort of crystal clear, you know, and a really nice refined audio track as well. Obviously helped the viewing experience on the 55-inch TV downstairs. The basic story, of course, is that Andy Dufresne gets sent to Shawshank Prison for the murder of his wife and her lover. Whilst inside, he befriends Ellis Boyd Redding, played by Morgan Freeman, obviously more affectionately known as Red. And it's about Andy's sort of trials and tribulations as he sort of settles into life in prison, and then slowly, with his skills that he's acquired on the outside as a banker and a finance expert, sort of starts to curry favour with the guards by doing their taxes and helping them sort of with legal financial loopholes, and then eventually ends up helping the warden with some corrupt finances and a money laundering operation through the prison. And of course, as well, big spoiler here, we learn that Andy isn't actually a murderer at all. Obviously, he protests his innocence throughout the whole film, as does every other criminal in the film except Red, who is the only guilty man in Shawshank, as he likes to put it. But we learn throughout the course of the film, of course, that Andy is innocent, and it changes the whole perspective on the, you know, on how you view Andy as the character, and how the other prisoners view him as well. And it's just a really heartwarming and lifting story, and I thoroughly enjoy it. Would I say, sort of subjectively, it's the best film that's ever made? No, absolutely not. And I don't know what I'd say that was, to be fair. But when I see it topping polls on a regular basis as the best film ever made, and, you know, IMDb top 250, and, you know, it's always high up on Rotten Tomatoes lists, and, you know, you see it quite often in people's top 10s. It's very, very easy to sort of see why people regard this film. I'll leave that in for free for you folks, as Razor Wire would say. It's really easy to see why this is regarded as one of the best, if not the best film of all time. I absolutely love it. Obviously, the Morgan Freeman narration in it is superb, and Tim Robbins' acting, and Bob Gunton's as well. Clancy Brown, Mark Rolston, so many great actors in this film. That are in there. The whole performances and the chemistry that they all have with each other is absolutely superb, and it sells it. It really does still baffle me that this was essentially a sleeper hit that only sort of got its following, a cult following almost, when it came out to home video after it was nominated for various Academy Awards, but was an absolute box office flop. And I just adore this film, and I don't think there's anything new that I can bring to the argument or the table about it, or like I say anything sort of really profound other than that I had a great time with it. And I dare say in a year, 18 months time, I'll be pulling the Blu-ray back off the shelf just in front of you guys and watching it again. And then we'll move on from the absolutely sublime, as my bandmate would say when we're introducing songs, to something that, this is not something that Ruben would say, but something that was absolutely atrocious. I nearly gave this film its own video, but I don't want to waste the time and the energy on it. So we'll talk about it in this collective roundup here. And this was Jeepers Creepers Reborn, Jeepers Creepers 4, the 4th instalment in the franchise anyway. What an absolute load of tosh this film was. Now, I'm not going to get into the controversy that surrounds the Jeepers Creepers franchise. Again, I'm sure that if you're into your films and you sort of well read on sort of things that are going on sort of in the movie making world of, you know, of recent history, you'll be, you know, probably at least mildly aware of the controversies that surrounded, you know, certain person involved in making those films. I'm not gonna delve into that here. This isn't the platform for that. But this new fourth film, it takes a completely new cast and a completely new creative team, and basically does I suppose a soft reboot of the franchise. So it's set after another 23-year cycle, and we follow the two main characters whose names I've forgotten because they're just so forgettable. But we follow a young chap and his hopefully soon to be fiance as they're going to a horror music festival that's sort of basically what it says on the tin, and it all feels in really bad taste as well, because it's not like, you know, that they're going to like a Freddy Krueger thing or you know, a Michael or a Jason or a Pinhead or whatever. It's like a festival celebrating serial killers. It's a really weird angle to go down. But then again, I suppose after the Netflix show this year, there's people dressing up as Jeffrey Dahmer, isn't there? So it takes all sorts, I guess, folks. But yeah, they arrive at this thing, and obviously the creeper's there, and you know, sort of all hell breaks loose as it does in these films. But they sort of rewrote some of the legend of the creeper in this one, and I didn't like what they did with it at all. And they sort of put this whole sort of like cult angle into it, where they're essentially luring victims back to a house to sort of obviously the creeper to hunt down in sort of like Scooby-Doo style, and then, you know, sort of feast on them. But there's these sort of, you know, the main two, the couple, they stop off at like a gift shop, I suppose you'd call it, on the way, and the woman in there, she's just giving off all kinds of weird vibes, and then the leading lady of the film starts getting these visions of like sort of, you know, being pregnant, and the woman from the shop and other people that you see throughout the film, you know, basically sort of doing culty things around her and sort of harvesting an unborn child, which is a plot point that really goes nowhere. And then, yeah, it's just shit. It's just absolutely shit. The acting is atrocious. The effects were god-awful. The story left little to be desired. You know, it was just run-of-the-mill, didn't bring anything new to the lore. And whilst the third one wasn't bad, it sort of set up a little sting at the end where, after we'd sort of, the third one, for folks who remember, does the little bit of an interlude between 1 and 2, and it sort of bridges the story there, so it's really 1.5 rather than Jeepers 3. But at the end of that, they set up what should have been the real Jeepers 3 story, as it were. So when they did this, you know, as soon as they started calling it Reborn, and they'd announced that Jonathan Brett wouldn't be playing the creeper, I had my reservations. But, you know, in spite of aforementioned controversies, the original is one of my favourite films, you know, horror films of all time, and I was really holding out hope that, you know, maybe it might breathe some new life and a bit of fresh air into the series. Nah, did it bollocks. It was absolutely just atrocious. Just really just should have left this one dead and buried. Don't watch it. Unfortunately, continuing on with that theme of absolute garbage, and funnily enough, it's also another 101 Films release, which is just a shame, because they obviously normally put out some absolutely fantastic stuff. And don't get me wrong, the release of that and the release of the next title I'm going to show you, which is The Last Broadcast, are both really, you know, really well-rounded releases, but unfortunately the films aren't great. So yeah, we decided earlier in the month, did me and Laura, that we wanted to watch a spooky film, you know, something that we hadn't seen before, and we both really like found footage horror movies. Surprisingly, we don't like the Blair Witch Project, but we love things like, obviously, the Paranormal Activity movies, and a real favourite of ours is a film called Grave Encounters, which is basically a send-up of, you know, the show Ghost Adventures with Zach Bagans and his team of guys that go around and do the ghost hunting, and it's a send up of that, basically, with a guy playing a Zach Bagans type, and they, you know, that's Grave Encounters anyway, is that, and obviously they find real ghosts. And so I saw this one in HMV, this Last Broadcast, And it looked to be along similar sort of lines, a bit sort of Blair Witchy, a bit, a bit Grave Encounters like, because the idea is obviously that it's a ghost hunting and a paranormal show going out looking for, the paranormal sort of thing, and then ultimately finding it. And the way that this film is presented is that we get a filmmaker. I'm going to talk spoilers here with this, because I don't think there's any way I can do this justice without. So if you've not seen it, well, don't watch it because it's shite. But if you've not seen it and you want to watch it, pause now, watch it, and come back. But yeah, it starts off, there's this filmmaker, he's a documentarian, and it starts off the film, sort of saying, well, there was this, this murder, and it was the Jersey Devil, and there's, I can't remember the character's name, but we'll call him John. Basically, this character, John, has been accused and convicted and then died in prison of the murder of the film crew of the last broadcast TV show. And the documentary and the documentarian that we're watching, who's the sort of the main character of this film, is essentially going, after I've reviewed all the footage of the night that they were killed when they were out filming a live broadcast episode, I'm now not so convinced that he's the killer. And you're sort of following, you're going through the footage, and there's interviews, and it's really cheap, and really, really cheap. Like, in terms of, like, it looks like it's been filmed on old sort of like camcorders that we'd have had in the 90s and the early 2000s, and the aesthetic of it feels really low budget and homemade, and that only lends itself to it, I'd say, for the first maybe half of it up to 2/3. And don't get me wrong, at this point, it's not winning any awards or anything like that. It's no groundbreaking film. There's a reason that this has been forgotten to time, and that, even though I'm not a fan of it, something like Blair Witch lives on. But then, yeah, they do this sort of like third act reveal, sort of like there's this big build up, like they do in documentaries, where it's, they're sort of getting to the point and trying to prove that John isn't this killer. And there's a young lady in it, and I can't remember the character's name that they give her, but basically she is a film restoration expert. And of course, the crucial bit of film that would either prove the main guy John's guilt or exonerate him is obviously destroyed, and she's there working some sort of technical magic to demagnetize it and do whatever. And then it reveals that the documentarian is the killer. And the film switches from a really crappy documentary to sort of, like you'd normally see a film where you sort of like watching it fly on the wall style, or, whatever the technical term is for when you're sort of watching the story, but you're not part of it, sort of thing. And it's just bloody ridiculous. Like, both me and Laura looked at each other and went, have they really just done that? And then obviously the acting skills of the people involved are non-existent, and almost like with the production quality of it before, it kind of lent itself to the scenario, because they weren't supposed to be actors playing roles. They were supposed to be real people, and, they were supposed to, you could believe them feeling uncomfortable on camera, because, they're not people that are paid to be in front of camera, day in, day out, sort of like movie stars are. And so there was this air of believability about it. And then there's the moment they changed focus in that third act, and it became, rather than a found footage film, just another film where we're following a story, and the sort of the documentarian then takes over as the central focus of the film. It just completely lost all momentum and became laughable. When we almost turned it off, but it was only out of sheer morbid curiosity. I saw it through to the credits, and yeah, just absolutely atrocious. It's not often I regret buying a release, but this one and this one, yeah, I'm not really happy about it. I imagine this is going to end up on Netflix or Prime or Now TV or what. Wait for it on there if you want. Don't give them your money, and just let this one die a death. Just don't watch it. Yeah, goodness me. So that was the last broadcast anyway, and my thoughts on that. So I'll wrap this up with one that I did enjoy, and again, keeping on with a bit of a spooky theme. I'm probably going to have my movie fan card revoked for saying this, but I'd never seen this next film, which I'll put a picture of here, and it's Hocus Pocus, until about 10 days ago. And I can hear you all going, what, James? You've not seen, Disney classic, sort of childhood classic, and you know, you're a 90s baby sort of thing. Yep, I'd never seen it, and it was just one of those that for whatever reason passed me by when I was a kid, and then by the time I sort of became aware of it, I was not bothered one way or the other really to sort of seek it out. And then obviously they've announced the sequel, and that's out now, and it's on Disney Plus. And Laura had never seen it either, but she'd seen the trailers for the sequel and was really quite sort of invested in the idea of watching the sequel. So we decided one evening that we'd sit down and watch the first one. And you know what? I had a really great time with it. And, you know, the three witches, obviously Bette Midler, Kathy Najimy and Sarah Jessica Parker, they steal the show, don't they? They're absolutely great. And I forget the actors' names, forgive me, but you know, the three young kids, there's Max, the lead lad, and then his girlfriend and his sister there, you know, they're great, and they sort of bounce off the witches really well. And I found Binks the cat to be really lovable, and, you know, I thought that there was, you know, the right level of comedy in there, balanced with the right sort of spook factor enough for it, you know, making it obviously still family friendly. And it was just really nice, just wholesome, fun entertainment, and, you know, the song and dance number where the parents, you know, are sort of cursed to keep dancing had me chuckling. And, you know, I thought it was a really sort of sweet, wholesome ending as well, that sort of Binks finally gets freed from his curse and gets to go on to the afterlife with his sister, and it's sort of an all's well that ends well. And I can't quite put my finger on why, other than the fact that it's a live-action 90s Disney movie. What on earth am I trying to say? But yeah, I can't quite put my finger on it. But it gave me Parent Trap vibes. You know, the Lindsay Lohan 90s remake. I think it was 90s, wasn't it? It gave me similar vibes from that. And I can't quite, like I say, put my finger on what it is, other than that they were made within a, you know, a similar window. But it definitely gave me that sort of vibe about it. And as it happens, I think me and Laura are going to watch the second one night this week, and then we're probably going to do a video where she'll join me in here and we'll talk about it together. She was quite keen to say, "Oh, if you review it, let me come and talk about it with you." So I said that I'd let her do that. The one criticism that I would have for Hocus Pocus, if you can call it a criticism really, is that I suppose me watching it as a 30-year-old man, I didn't quite get out of it what I imagine I would have gotten out of it if I'd watched it as a kid. Obviously, it came out when I was, I think, 1 or 2. But if I'd watched it as a 5, 6, 7-year-old, for argument's sake, I reckon I'd have got much more out of it. And, you know, sort of, it'd have become one of those films that just holds nostalgia, you know, like maybe something like Scooby-Doo does for me, or Spy Kids or something like that. When I sort of, you know, rewatch them as an adult, I sort of, there's the rose tinted glasses, isn't there? Whereas with this, it was excuse the pun, warts and all sort of a thing. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to watching the second one. I hope that the reports of a third one doesn't happen, because I'm really not a fan of this whole sort of, you know, let's do a later day sequel and then a really quick sequel in succession to that sort of thing. It's like, you know, if you're lucky enough to get lightning to strike twice, which from the reviews I'm reading, Hocus Pocus 2 has landed well, then I say leave it be, and you've done what you set out to do, haven't you? But there we are, folks. That's been episode 2 of what I've been watching lately. Of course, I've watched more than just the 4 titles we talked about here, but these were the ones that sort of stuck in my mind when I was thinking about what do I want to talk about on this latest episode. So I hope you've enjoyed it. You'll have to leave me your thoughts below on these films if you've seen them. Like I say, if you've not, I'd recommend the 2 of them, Hocus Pocus and The Shawshank Redemption. I certainly wouldn't recommend going near the other 2, unless, of course, you're a fan of bad movies, or in Jeepers Creepers' case, you're a completist like me and need to watch it for your own sort of curiosity on the subject. Like I say, if you've liked the video, leave those comments below, drop me a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, hello, nice to meet you. Please think about subscribing so that we can stay in touch for future videos. I'd love to keep you around. And of course, it helps the channel to grow. Above all else, folks, take care of yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you again really soon for my next video. Bye for now.